would like to introduce Larry Schreeten from the Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Larry has been Executive Director of the Green Energy Consumers Alliance for 21 years this week. And the organization is a nonprofit based in Boston and Providence. Larry oversees a staff of 20 who run consumer-facing programs and who advocate for good energy policy at the state and local levels. And Larry is going to talk with us tonight about the potential for combining large group purchases of electricity, which is known as aggregation, with local community solar projects for an even greater climate-saving impact. This is timely as several of the Cape Ann and neighboring communities are now doing or considering their own aggregation programs. Larry, you have the floor.
So thank you. I think those turbines look familiar to you. So as Candace said, we're a nonprofit organization based in Boston and Providence. We've been around since 1982. I've been there for 21 years, and we try to make clean energy more affordable and accessible to all consumers. But we also do some public policy work at the state and local level. What I'll talk about tonight kind of bridges those two things, a consumer program and the advocacy. Some of you may have seen this, but back in March or February of 2020, we put out the second edition of a report about green municipal aggregation. That's what we call it. Municipal aggregation's been allowed in Massachusetts since 1997, but it got a big boost a few years ago. And now a lot of communities around the state are looking at it. Gloucester's in the game, and this report is really from our perspective. We're directly involved in quite a few communities, but we try to also put some facts together about other aggregations that we're not involved with. And we think that we've pioneered the term or the model of green municipal aggregation, where communities are adding more renewable energy than required by state law. For those of you who aren't familiar, but I'm betting that most of you are, with municipal aggregation, the community gets to choose their electricity supplier that serves all customers except for those who opt out. And so in the case of many communities, they're adding 5, 10 or more percent renewable energy than required by state law, but consumers have the ability to opt out, and they can go to another competitive power supplier. They can go to National Grid's basic service, but people can also opt in. And the program has been very successful. We even have opportunities where consumers can opt up. If somebody wants 100% renewable energy, they can have that. If somebody is perhaps financially stressed, they can do what we call opt down, and they can get a good electricity price at without the extra renewable energy. What we've found is that consumers in Gloucester and other places are able to save money while also adding more renewable energy. This map is in our report. It's a little hard to see right now, but we've kind of color-coded the status of communities around the state, whether they're doing a very green product with aggregation, or they haven't done something, or they're in the process. And we think that within maybe 3 years, the communities that are not involved in aggregation will be the exception, that most consumers in the state will be part of an aggregation in their community. And within just a couple of years, by our estimates, green municipal aggregation throughout the state will produce about 700,000 megawatt hours of green electricity, which, if they were wind turbines like the kind that you have in Gloucester, it would take about 200 wind turbines to do that, which is pretty phenomenal. So Boston's coming online as an example, and many other communities. So and this is what we call voluntary demand. This is not required by state law. This is because people like you have made the choice in your community. So it's over and above the requirements of state law. Here's a little cutout showing, this is a few months old, but this is what we thought. The ones in blue are looking at whether or not to do aggregation. The ones in green already are. So I know that talking to Candace and others, that there's some interest, like we know that in Gloucester you're buying extra renewable energy, but are there ways you can tie it to a local project? And so I'll just briefly go over this. I'll leave the slides with you, but First of all, every plan that a community has to be approved by the Mass Department of Public Utilities. They've kind of gotten used to the idea that a community is going to bring in more renewable energy, and those things they've been approving. However, if you want to support a brand new project, like a solar project in your community or something like that, and that might require some sort of an investment, that might require a special adder, a little bit more on the rate charged to consumers, you really have to have a very strong plan, and you're going to need a lawyer who can explain it to the Department of Public Works in order to obtain the approval, because they're kind of concerned at the Department of Public Utilities about charging ratepayers for something that might be unclear as to how it's going to work out, and maybe they won't get what was intended. And so one point here is most aggregations have 3-year contracts with electricity suppliers, and the kind of projects that you might want to do on a local basis usually need about a contract of about 10 years. Who's ever building it needs to have a 10-year financing, a bond or a bank loan or something like that. And so there are ways, however, that you can do that. And so, for example, a city might use 5,000 megawatt hours a year of electricity for its schools, public buildings, and streetlights. The aggregation might only be around for 3 years, and then it might get renewed. But that what the city can do is enter into a long-term contract for the renewable energy, and then it could sell the renewable energy back to the aggregation as time goes on. But there has to be somebody who's going to sign a long-term contract to make the project happen. Another way is that you could just buy the community for the municipal load could just buy the amount of renewable energy needed to meet its own compliance with the RPS. But that's another way of supporting a project. So for example, if the municipal load is 5,000 megawatt hours, and I'm not sure what Gloucester's is, for example, but 20% of that, which is roughly what the RPS is right now, that would be about 1,000 megawatt hours per year. Now, the next slide, I'm going to show how you can pay for 10 years of renewable energy in a 3-year contract. This is well, again, I'll leave you with the slides, but the dark green is that over the life of the 3-year contract with the electricity supplier, you would collect enough revenue to pay for the 10-year project. And then it would go into an escrow account, and then it would pay out over 10 years. And so if you'd have to explain that to the Department of Public Utilities and get their approval, that essentially you're going to be charging local ratepayers a little bit more in order to support your local project, and then you would pay for it over 10 years. And the escrow account would ensure that you got what you paid for over time. Now, this could be used to have an agreement where you're purchasing the renewable energy certificates from a project, or you could actually directly invest. If the project cost $1 million, you could collect $1 million over 3 years and then pay it out over time in order to finance the project. So in other words, there is a way to finance a 10-year project with a 3-year electricity supply contract is the point I'm trying to make. Just to give you a sense of scale, Gloucester's aggregation uses about 4,200 renewable energy certificates per year, or 4,200 megawatt hours per year. The 2 wind turbines you have produces more than double that. And just by way of comparison, a megawatt of solar produces about 1,200 RECs per year. So it would take a pretty good size solar project to sort of be a comparable amount as those 2 wind turbines. There are some concerns when you collect that kind of money. The Department of Public Utilities will be asking about this, is if you're going to commit your money to try to make a new project happen, the project hasn't been built yet, and usually projects come along just fine. If you've already committed to the site, the developer has the site control, maybe it's the city itself, but things can go wrong, things can be delayed. Almost every project gets a delay of some kind. So what the Department of Public Utilities will care about is you're collecting money from ratepayers, and then if the project is delayed what happens? Will the ratepayers be getting what they paid for? So it's something that if you want to build local projects, you should really go ahead and try to work it out. But these are complications that will come into play. Now with solar, everyone loves solar. We want to do more solar in the communities, but there are some concerns about that. The big new solar program in Massachusetts is called the SMART program. With that program, if you're developing solar, you will get paid by National Grid for your electricity and your renewable energy certificates. National Grid takes the renewable energy certificate and uses that to comply with their renewable portfolio standard. You get one price. You get a check for the SMART program. Then, if you want to go outside the SMART program, there's a net metering program where you would build a project, it would net meter, and then you would have renewable energy certificates. But there's a problem. National Grid is kind of at its limit for the amount of net metering projects it can do in your territory. So that's a problem that will have to be dealt with either at the legislative level or something else, maybe the Department of Public Utilities. Now, it's possible that you can build a solar project without net metering or by going through the SMART program, but the finances of that get pretty difficult. Solar, the wholesale value of the solar is less than what the solar project really would need. And so all the information we have is solar needs either to do net metering and get paid for the RECs, or it needs the SMART program in order to be financially viable. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I was double checking with a couple of friends who are more expert at this, and that does seem to be a problem that you would have to somehow overcome in Gloucester or adjacent communities that have National Grid. You can do projects besides solar. They could be anaerobic digestion, could be small hydro, could be onshore wind, like you already have done that in Gloucester, or it could be offshore wind. And so there's a picture of the Block Island wind farm. And I don't think it's too soon for you to be thinking about that, is also supporting an offshore wind project that could be coming down the path in, say, sometime between 2025 and 2030. This is a graph taken from the Brattle Group, which has done some work on how is New England possibly going to ever meet its electricity needs. And I guess you want to look at in the lower left of each circle is we're going to really need a lot of offshore wind in the next 10, 20, 30 years in order to meet our climate goals. And so onshore solar is great, but I'm encouraging all the communities that we talk to think about, as you try to grow your programs and think about stuff, it really is something to look forward to. I think offshore wind creates a great opportunity for affordable power, and it creates a lot of jobs, particularly on coastal communities. So I guess I'll just end by saying that when there's a will, there's a way. If you have a local project, whether it's a local solar project, or it could be another kind of community energy project. It could be perhaps you want to add some storage, or sort of create some resiliency at a local school, or you want to do something in support of electric vehicles or something like that. Maybe electric buses, like Beverly just added. Those are things that you can do by the state law with aggregation. And the only trick is that you have to have a good plan in place, and you'd have to get it approved by the Mass Department of Public Utilities. And I think that's it. If you have any questions, Larry at greenenergyconsumers.org, that's our website. And either Jaima or I would be happy to talk to you either tonight or another time.
Great. In fact, there are some questions here. First one being, would a wind turbine project be able to get around the National Grid net metering limitations?
A wind project, it depends whether or not it would be net metering or it would be tied directly into the utility. And the difference is important. The 2 wind turbines that are at Equity Industrial Park were built through the net metering program. And basically the economic value of that is better than selling the wind power into the wholesale market, right into the grid. And so in order to have a wind project work with the offshore wind project, into the grid, it really does have to be, the economics have to be great. It has to be an incredibly windy site. And usually 1 or 2 wind turbines aren't as economically viable as a wind farm. So in other words, when the Equity Industrial Project, we love it. It's a great project. I'm not sure that would be viable unless it was net metering.
Excellent. I'll say there is a comment. Larry, great presentation of a complex subject. Thank you. Many prayers and thanks.
Yeah.
Another question was, might the coming election influence opportunities or funding? Is there anything, can you comment on that?
Well, my organization's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that cannot be involved in electoral politics. But after the election, we will either have a president who will be creating great opportunities for renewable energy, or we will have one that won't.
Thank you.
I would like to know, for a community like Gloucester, which has a fishing industry that is struggling, if there were an offshore wind project off Gloucester, you had mentioned the possibility that it could generate jobs that would be very relevant to a city like Gloucester. What kinds of jobs might those be?
Oh, what I love about it is, my understanding, and we're talking, Jaima and I are talking to some offshore wind developers. I could do that another night, but there are several projects you've probably heard about: Vineyard Wind, Revolution Wind, Mayflower Wind, a number of big projects that have been approved by Massachusetts or Rhode Island. And there's all kinds of jobs: blue collar jobs, white collar jobs. For people who can work in the construction trades, who want to go out on a boat and do the work, on a vessel, great jobs certainly in the electric field, but also in pile driving. There's jobs for carpenters, skilled jobs, really good union jobs that would pay well. But then, of course, it's going to involve, because you know what, you're not going to get me up on one of those wind turbines. I'm not afraid of heights, so I'm not going to do that. But there's plenty of jobs for people who want to do the office work, the marketing, the administration of that. It's one of the biggest fields that we could have in Massachusetts. It's going to be a real job creator. There'll be jobs, people who are getting on the boat to go do the project, and there'll be people on shore doing everything else.
Larry, are any of the projects you mentioned, like Revolution or Mayflower, in the vicinity of Gloucester, or would we have to persuade a developer to come closer to our area?
Oh no, these projects are huge. We're talking about almost a couple thousand megawatts of offshore wind. Jaima, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are generally off Nantucket Sound. I could bring you a map another time. The point, they don't need to be closer to Gloucester, but they're federally permitted, and the power is coming onshore. For the most part, those are going to be coming on, the line's going to be coming on to Cape Cod. But I think over time, new wind developers are looking up and down the East Coast from Maine to Florida for sites. So I think there's a huge opportunity for Gloucester to be a staging area for another project that could come online.
So I've been at a conference. This is Ellen Lehman. Amber Hewitt, I heard her speak, and she's probably running for an office, but before that she was offshore wind. And right. She explained that the continental shelf goes up to Gloucester more, and it's more difficult in this area to site wind turbines than it is on the Cape. Can you mention that, or have you heard that?
Well, she actually does work more closely with the industry than I do. I would say, I guess, two things, which is, I do know that the conditions, a few miles away from Cape Cod are excellent. But for building wind turbines, it's very windy, the water's shallow enough, the whole bit. But I don't think that the project has to be too close to Gloucester for Gloucester to benefit quite a bit.
Thank you.
Larry, would you be able to help us woo, the interest of a developer in our area, or help us connect to somebody that could?
Well, absolutely. I think I would be happy to do that. We do have some contacts, but I also would like to address something from the mayor. She has sent in the chat that she wants to make sure that anybody trying to develop offshore wind would work very closely with fishermen, and couldn't agree more. There has to be environmental studies being done, and there has to be consensus. I believe that offshore wind and the fishing industry can coexist, but it has to be planned out properly. So to the extent that we would be involved with any project, and believe me, we're not a major player in this, but I would totally agree that's something that you should insist upon. But I would say these offshore wind projects are going to happen, and I think there are opportunities for people in Gloucester today to get involved with that.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, which was if you might be able to address any key potential policies or regulations for building and requirements for alternative energy built into the project. So, and maybe on this example with the wind, is there just sort of a key regulation or policy or two that you might highlight that has not been mentioned?
Well, we have, in Massachusetts, we have a great law called the Renewable Portfolio Standard, and it requires National Grid and other electricity suppliers to increase the amount of renewable energy in the mix by a percentage. It goes up each year, and it's a great law. It just doesn't go enough. It needs to be the increment, the annual increment needs to be changed from 2% to more like 3%. And we're advocating for that at the State House, and I think that'll happen. And there should be increased support for both offshore wind and solar, within that policy.
Great. Excellent. Well, Larry, thank you very much. Very informative. We really appreciate your information presentation.